Dr. Show here. Welcome back. If you are new here, welcome. I know it has been some time since we last connected, but you know, things move. That's how life is sometimes. And I just had to get back on the streams today. Um, there's a message that's been heavy on my spirit, and I have to share it. I have to share it. Now, the intention of this message is, of course, to bring about introspection, to bring about healing, reflection, and essentially to help you all get to a place where you're okay with thinking critically about the world around you. Okay. Now, this topic, I want to be mindful and considerate of the fact that this topic can be very sensitive to people. And because it's sensitive, it needs to be talked about. And so today, what we're going to be talking about is decolonizing your identity. Okay. Now, specifically, I am speaking to people who internalize the identity of being Black. Okay. People who call themselves Black. I'm a Black woman, I'm a Black man, I have a Black family, I have a Black child. Black, 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 blackity black. Okay? While I want to acknowledge that there has been a culture of empowerment that is now associated with that name or that description, I also want to challenge the veracity or the truth behind it, right? First, let's talk about the color, okay? The color Black is a very distinct color. I want you to look at your hand, look at both hands. And in you looking at both hands, what color do you see? What's the color? Not the programmed race that they told you need to identify yourself as, but the color that you see. As I'm looking at my hand right now, the color is brown, right? I have brown hands. So why is it that despite the color that we actually see, there's a widely accepted idea that we are Black? This is Black. Okay. These are not the same. This is not the same shade. This is not even the same pigment. Okay? So, why again are we programmed to believe that we are something that we are not? That we are to call ourselves something that is clearly different from what we wake up every day and see. Now, the spectrum of browns that the people of my similar pigment are of, it's a vast, wide spectrum. We have deeply melanated people and we have lighter melanated people, but there is a spectrum. So why is it okay for us to adopt this idea of Black or Blackness when at the base level, the color of my skin is not Black? It's almost as if we've accepted a collective delusion about what we are seeing. We don't look at the sky, and yes, the sky has variations. However, we don't look at the sky and say that the sky is red on a regular basis. Sure, when the sun is rising or when the sun appears to be rising, there can be variations of reds, of purples even, of some yellows. But when the sun reaches other points, for the majority of the day, the sky is blue. Why don't we say the sky is red or green? Why are we okay with calling ourselves something that we clearly are not at the base level? Okay, so that's the first question I want you to challenge yourself to reflect on. The other piece I want to bring in now is the fact that when we think about the color spectrum, we think about how white and black are often put in opposition of each other. And so, bringing in race now, it's no surprise that racism exists because if you have a group of people that calls themselves black, then the opposition is going to be people that call themselves white. Now, people of a lighter or more pale melanin content, if they describe themselves as white and we describe ourselves as black, we are now in direct opposition. But even people that call themselves white are along the spectrum of skin tones and skin colors that, again, are either have high pigment or a low pigment based off of the melanin content. So you may find somebody that's very light, maybe cream, but they're still not the color white. But again, we've accepted that we will call ourselves these colors that we are not to uphold an ideal or an idea of opposition that keeps us within the confines of what it means to be in direct opposition. We have also been taught, and this can be now put in with some religious concepts, that white is pure and dark or black is evil. And so in, again, those oppositions, we have goodness and badness being associated with these colors that we, again, internalize. Further upholding this construct of racism that exists. Why? Question, right? Why is it that we're only taught about these two quote unquote races that are based off of these two colors, and only these two people fall into those categories and are expected to identify themselves as such? Asian people don't call themselves white. Now, because of colonization, and we can now, let's bring colonization in, right? In the spirit of decolonizing our identity, colonization has taught other civilizations and other people that white is right, and that a person's proximity to whiteness establishes the power and superiority of other people. And so, sure, in terms of a construct, people who are lighter skinned may wish to be described as white, may wish to be identified as white because of what that word means. But they're not circling that on the census. Guess what? There's actually a bubble there that speaks to their ethnicity. Asian. That's a bubble. That's an option that people can choose from. Pacific Islander. Another group of people that have a slightly deeper melanin content, a slightly deeper pigment of their skin. There's a bubble for that. American Indian, I believe there's a bubble for that as well. Hispanic. there's a bubble for that. Now, notice these days, and I don't know if this is specifically on the census, but when a person is identifying themselves, whether it's for an application, whether it is for some type of survey, whatever, there's also now a distinction that you can put non-white Hispanic or white Hispanic. Why do you think that is? Again, this notion of proximity to whiteness signifies this idea of goodness. Excuse me. Also, when you go to these countries, right? If you go to Mexico, the people in Mexico, even if they are lighter or fair skinned, they're not calling themselves white. They're still calling themselves Mexican. Now, they may use other identifications to establish a certain level of maybe classism that exists, but they're not identifying themselves based on race. In Jamaica, they're not classifying themselves based off of race. There are other, don't get me wrong, there are other isms at play in which people internalize and use, again, as a form of exerting power or superiority over other groups. However, Jamaicans in Jamaica are not saying, oh, I'm black. They say I'm Jamaican. So there is a connection and an identification with the country, with the culture, and the customs that are associated with that geographical location. So now coming back around to this notion of being black, it's isolated to people who are in, generally, it's isolated to people who are in America. And so, yes, there's a bubble that says black. Sometimes the bubble says black/African American. We've also come to the conclusion very recently that not all people with deeply melanated skin tones or a deeper pigment come from Africa. You can find people with deep pigments all over the world. We can talk about historical origins and go way back and talk about migration and all of those things. Fine. But for the purposes of this video, we'll stick to the idea that in America, while there is acknowledgement of the transatlantic slave trade and other migrations prior to that, because this transatlantic slave trade was actually the fourth major migration, major diasporic migration that occurred, the fourth. There were three others prior. During that migration, a great number of people were brought over. However, prior to that, there were people of deeper pigment here already. And so, question, would it be okay for you to explore those origins a little bit deeper, to explore your origins a little bit deeper, to figure out which ethnic group you actually come from, so that you can actually free yourself from the construct of oppression and opposition that keeps your mind boxed in about who you are and what you are able to become in the face of this dichotomy of black and white, and actually identify with a geographical location that speaks to where your bloodline comes from. I push you, I implore you, I encourage you to do your best to do your due diligence by first asking yourselves these critical questions and then finding the answers in a way that completely dispels the illusions and the delusions that are attached to the construct of race, that is attached to the construct of what it means to be white and black, specifically for people who regard themselves and identify themselves as black. I want to encourage you to see yourself, to look at your skin and to see yourself, and to really, really make a commitment to seeing yourself as something other than what you have been told you are.